Warning: this episode contains details that some listeners may find disturbing. He managed money for Beyoncé, as well as other A-list musicians, actors, and athletes. He was trusted by some of the biggest names in the biz, until he wasn't. In 2017, Jonathan Todd Schwartz, once a powerful business manager to the stars, was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for embezzling over $7 million from his own clients, including more than $4 million from singer Alanis Morrissette. What would drive someone with so much access, influence, and success to risk it all? Greed? Addiction? Drug abuse? Today, Schwartz is a licensed addiction counselor and therapist at Altus Rehab, but before that, he was at the center of one of the most shocking betrayals in the entertainment industry. Join me as we venture into a unique situation for a study of strange, where I interview Jonathan Todd Schwartz himself about his story, one of deception, rock bottom, and redemption. White-collar crime may not be discussed a lot in true crime shows, maybe because it doesn't leave blood at the scene. But in this case, the wreckage was just as real. This is a study of strange. Welcome back to the show. I'm Michael. Today we're doing things a little bit differently. I have a special guest with me who I'm very interested to talk with, Jonathan Todd Schwartz. Jonathan, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So an interesting topic to me, I think, in any criminal story is, where does criminal behavior begin? Where does it start? How did your experience in that world, where did that start? Where did that come from?
So it's an interesting way to pose the question as to where did it come from. My father was a gambling addict and cocaine addict and involved in what I like to call drug dealing for, let's just call it the Jewish mafia. He has since passed away in February of 2017, so I can talk about that freely. And I never thought I would end up being like him, but frankly, in my opinion, I became much worse than him, and that is in terms of my criminal behavior. Violating my fiduciary responsibility to clients and embezzling a lot of money from those handful of clients, and that started in 2010 ish. And how it started was, before I say how it started, I use my father as an example because there's evidence-based literature that supports multi-generational transmission of
Yes, yeah.
whether it's addiction or maladaptive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And so I own and take full responsibility for the poor choices I've made. But that, I think that answers your question in terms of probably the origin of it. And then it became a choice for me, right? It's like the disease first, and then the choice follows. And I'm the one that made those poor choices. Um, Started when in 2010, that's when I would say I became a compulsive gambler. I met a assistant coach of mine in baseball. I was coaching my kids' youth sports teams, and he approached me and asked if I want to place a bet. And prior to that, I had two, I'll call it binges, where I was either a bookie or for 2 weeks in college, or gambling one day. But at that point, it was like not considered an addiction for me, because it was
Right.
like just two binge episodes, if you will. And now I said yes to this assistant coach, and I started out with small bets on sports. I bet on everything from NFL to college football to NBA, college basketball, Major League Baseball, every day for 6 years, or a little less than 6 years. Not a single day did I miss calling the bookie. This assistant coach became the bookie, and it just got progressively worse. The first week, I said to myself, I'll just bet $50, $100. And then a few days later, I start making larger bets, and I end up the week losing $25,000. and I was afraid to take it from my own account because I didn't want my wife at the time or my partners, or because my account, we use one of the bookkeepers in our office to pay my bills, but my wife still had access to it, and I didn't want her to see. I didn't want my partners to see. I didn't want anybody to know that now I'm going to quote unquote borrow money from Alanis Morissette. And I use Alanis Morissette publicly only because she went public. The other clients I do want, the handful of other clients I will keep confidential because they've asked for that and I want to
For sure.
respect that.
Hmm.
So this first $25,000 weekly loss, I thought, let me just borrow the money from Alanis with the intent to pay her back the next week. And unfortunately, the next week I lost, and the week after that, and the months after that, and she was the largest financial victim of my crime, and that's how it got started. And I just couldn't stop because I very much disliked gambling, but I was chasing with
Yeah.
the hope of a gambler's mind. My mind was such a gambler's mind, not only being a degenerate, but the mindset of a gambler is grandiosity and this and fantasy that, okay, it'll just take me one weekend and I'll be able to pay off Alanis and everybody else and no one will know and I could continue in as a business manager in the entertainment space, but that was not realistic, particularly because of the amount of money that I was betting and the amount that I eventually and ultimately embezzled from a handful of clients.
Right. And let me ask you this, and I'm sure it's different with everybody that's involved with white collar crime. So I don't want to have you speak for everybody. However, it seems to me when I read about stories of other white collar criminals or anything like that, that there's this part where it almost seems like they know they're going to get caught, but it's that chase, it's that a little bit of an addiction like you're talking about, but you're just digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper. Would that be the right way to kind of think about that?
Absolutely. Inevitably, I wanted to get caught because I had low self-esteem and insecure, and I didn't believe at this time that asking for help was a strength. I viewed it at this time as a weakness, which today
Mhm.
I feel very differently about that. Today, I believe that asking for help is a huge strength for male or female. I wish I had asked for help, but instead, inevitably, I knew I would get caught. I never had a dopamine rush, as you know, with winnings, but I certainly felt horrible with losses. And yeah, I was chasing, and inevitably, like you said, I knew I was going to get caught. That did not stop me from continuing living the fantasy of one day winning it back,
Yeah.
not even thinking about taking it from my own account yet at this point. And it was an awful place for me. I was in a very dark place for about 6 years. I could not sleep one single night. I needed sleeping aids. If I heard a siren, I thought it was here was my time. I was going to always looking over my shoulder and in fear because I was keeping this dark secret of what I was doing from literally everyone. Not
Mhm.
my ex-wife knew, not my children, not my partners, not my employees, not my friends that I grew up with, nobody. I and keeping this suppressed, the trauma as well as now the crime from everybody, just caused me an enormous amount of stress and living in fear. And so I truly lived a double life. To the outer world, I presented like this successful, well put together mentally and physically human being. But deep down inside, I was so insecure and had such low self esteem. This is why I say I lived this double life. And I know it's an overused cliche, but for me, it truly applied. And, you know, I just had nightmares most every night. What's going to happen to my family? What's going to happen to my firm? What's going to happen to the victims? And it was an awful place that ultimately led me to an addiction to cocaine. So now,
So
you
that
know,
came about after you had started gambling and all of that. Oh, that's interesting.
so um, I had lots of suicidal ideation with but in sometime in 2015 when I was slowly stopping to gamble.
Yeah.
And I became dependent on cocaine. And I have coronary artery disease, and so it wasn't really wise. It was another poor choice I made. And so, the experts that studied me and interviewed me once the criminal behavior became public suggested that yes, you were trying to kill yourself, and B, it wasn't very smart of you to use cocaine because it's really bad for your heart. And I would wake up, and I was doing that for about 6, 7 months, all day long, 24/7,
Oh
still
my.
going to work, asking my assistant to cancel meetings, waking up in cold in wet sheets, heart racing, and I just thankfully I could identify reasons to live in those moments. Those reasons being my beautiful three children, my wife at that time, my mother, my stepfather, my brother, and but not myself. I was so disappointed in myself,
Yeah.
deep down inside. I really, in addiction, many of us, myself included, all we know is fight and flight survival mode and self sabotage. And my pattern was self sabotaging myself during this 6 year run. And the cocaine just added fuel to that self sabotage. And I had a very addictive mind, and I was very impulsive, and all these are mostly common traits with people
Hmm.
struggling with addiction. And now you add the trauma that I hadn't dealt with yet at this time, that really propelled me to the led to the addiction.
Let's back up now. I want to hear how you got involved with business management, how you ended up at a very great firm in and around Los Angeles. But yeah, take me back to the beginning. How did you get that job? How did you start to get introduced to the clientele that you had?
So I grew up in upstate New York, and I had about 6, 7 CPAs in my family, cousins, right? Not nuclear family, but my cousins.
Mm.
And one of them was at the time a bright music business manager who was a partner at a boutique entertainment business management firm as well. And I always wanted to work for him. And frankly, accounting was the only subject in high school that I was, or college, that I was good at, or at least interested in. And so when I graduated college, I called him up and I said, "Cuz, this particular cousin, I'm ready to come work for you." And he said, "No, you're not. You're immature, you're irresponsible. What do you know about business management?" And that really certainly deflated my ego at that time, of course. And he suggested that I join, I find employment working for one of the big four, big six firms, whatever it was at my time. And so I took a job working for a sole practitioner in San Francisco's financial district for about 3.5 plus years.
Hmm.
And then after my time there, my cousin called me. It was about 1994, and said, "You're ready to come work for me." So at this point in my life, I was still married, and I had the first of my three sons. And we packed up our little car and we drove down south to Los Angeles. And I was the first one in his office, the last one to leave. I did not want nepotism associated with me. Um, and I also was making very little money, and I had now a responsibility as a father and as a husband to provide financially for my wife and for my son at the time. And so I got paid enough money to put food on the table, a small roof over our head, and I really was learning from my mentor at the time, who happened to be my cousin. And spent most of the time he's in the mailroom opening up files and just learning about the clients and the accounting part of what we do as business managers for clients. And fast forward in 1999, my cousin's firm was acquired by Chase Manhattan Bank, now known as JP Morgan. And he asked me if I want to get involved in investment banking and family wealth management. And I said, "Cuz, I love you, but no thank you. I appreciate all the wisdom and the opportunities that you've provided me with, but I would like, with your blessing, to join another firm." He gave me his blessing. He allowed me to take a small book of business with and I joined GSO Business Management, not as a partner at this point, just as a
Hmm.
business manager who had a small book of business. And that's how I got my start in the entertainment business management world, from my cousin. And in 2000, I joined the firm in February of 2000. And shortly after, in that same year, 2000, I got a lucky break with a band called Linkin Park.
Oh yeah.
And they really, that was the pivotal moment in my career where now everyone is really starting to schmooze with me. And I'm not a big schmoozer. And I certainly wasn't a big schmoozer in the entertainment community because most people are phony.
Yeah.
And I think my New York upbringing helped me kind of be candid and blunt, respectfully. And so I think clients like that about me. If you want a yes business manager, that's not me. I'm going to say no when no is appropriate, and I'll certainly elaborate. But Lincoln Park was that lucky break. Sometime in before November, their release of 2000 Hybrid Theory, they hired us months before, and I became the primary partner working on them. And now my assistant's saying, agents, lawyers, personal managers are calling, and they want you to join them for dinner or lunch. And I did, but I wasn't going to do it with the intention that if they refer me a client, they're automatically going to receive a referral from me. I do
Hmm.
not believe in forced reciprocity. And so I would refer the clients to professionals if I felt that professional was in the best interest of the client.
Right. So this is actually a great place just to explain, I think, what a business manager does specifically with people in entertainment, because I'm sure that might be slightly different than other high net worth individuals that need a business manager. But yeah, walk us through kind of what you do and also what you have access to, because that plays a role in this story as well.
Absolutely. So, in my opinion, traditional CPA practitioner, accountant, at least most of society views a CPA as a tax preparer,
Right.
right? Let's enter the data that you provide the accountant. He or she puts it in his computer, turns around, pulls out the tax return, goes over it with the client, and tries to help mitigate the client's tax liability, so on and so forth. A business manager, we wear many hats. So I say, like, we know a little bit about most everything
Right.
relative to entertainment. So that might include um, tour accounting, might include royalty accounting, might include risk management. And so the way that the firm was structured is we had about 75 employees, and I was one of four partners.
Hmm.
And my responsibility as one of the four partners was to manage the 75 employees. I was like the managing partner relative to HR, if you will, or staffing. But the bookkeeper paid the bills. The bookkeeper collected income and put that into the financial software that we used. That financial software created a balance sheet, financial statements, an income statement, and other relevant financial documents and reports that gave us as business managers a global picture of the client's personal and professional financial world. And with that, we help guide the client to achieve their short, mid, and long term goals. So our risk management department was very important because our clients are exposed to a society that's very litigious. And our job was to protect the client from litigation by having the right policies in place and enforced in the event the client's going to be sued. So if that could be a music artist a drummer throws the drumstick out to the audience, and before you know it, the stick hits the person in the eye, and now the person's likely going to sue the client. And
Right.
so
Right.
we've protected the client from that. Tax department, same thing as a traditional tax preparer. We want to make sure that we're doing tax planning throughout the year for the client, budgeting for the client, tour accounting for the client. When clients are provided a proposal to do a global world tour, my responsibility is to show the budget to the client so that they could decide if they're happy with the profit margin. And if they're happy with the profit margin, they'll say yes to the agent. Let's proceed with booking this tour. If they're not happy with the profit margin, it's my responsibility to sit with the client and collaborate and make suggestions on how you can improve the profit margin. So overall, that's what we did as a business manager, and that's the difference between a business manager and a CPA.
Yeah, and I think just by saying you wear many different hats, I think that's a really important aspect to what you did. Why, can I ask, was it Alanis's account that you started with?
It's a great question, and I haven't really been asked that question before, so I appreciate it. So she had, ironically, and no pun intended using the word ironically relative to Alanis, but she had, we had segregated an account called her household account. and in that account was monies that I identified as I could take from, borrow from, steal from, because that was earmarked to purchase a future home for her. So I knew immediately she did not need those funds, and I knew that I would highly unlikely that I would get caught.
Hmm.
Just with the remember, my intention was not to steal from her; it was to pay her back rather rapidly, maybe in the first week, and certainly weeks after. And then obviously it became progressively worse. And that's why I identified Alanis as the first person, if you will. At that point, it would have been the only person
Right.
for a shorter period of time, because she had this money segregated for a future acquisition, which was another home for herself. So I knew that that money wasn't invested in her portfolio with her asset manager. I knew that there were monies on elsewhere to continue to pay for the lifestyle that she was used to, and so on and so forth. That's why Alanis was targeted by me.
Got it. Got it. And how long until your I'll call it an addiction. I hope that's okay to call it
Yeah,
that. But
it
y-
was a full blown addiction. Yeah,
right. So how long until you started to dip into other accounts from other clients?
probably. So I was on almost a 6 year run. I think probably after year 2 to 3 with Alanis, I realized I actually didn't even realize how much money I took. That's how naive I was, and that's how much I was careless and ignored my
Yeah.
criminal behavior. Um, it wasn't really until I got a call from her new business manager in 2015 when I realized that I took over 4.6 million from her. But to your question, it was probably at I would say about 2 to 3 years that I decided to go to another client, because um, I was just too worried that it was, I was taking whatever amount I was taking. I thought it was maybe $1 million. I didn't realize it
Mhm.
was 4.6, but either way, it was a significant amount of money. And there was another client that I identified that I think I could take a little bit of money from, and then another client a little bit of money from, and so on and so forth.
What led to you getting caught?
So now, fast forward to 2016, with Beyonce, who was my client. She was rehearsing in Tampa Bay for her Lemonade tour, and I received a call from my partners that Alanis's new business manager, which again I'll use the word ironically, happens to be my cousin's firm, who came back from investment banking and started his own new business management firm, and she happened to hire him. I mean, what's the irony in that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So his partner Howard discovered that there was about 4.6 million over a period of time cash withdrawals, and my partners asked what was that for, and in that moment I continued my dishonesty and manipulation, and I concocted a fraudulent story that she was investing those monies in a cannabis business, which she was not. I was
Mhm.
stealing it. And so they said, in that moment they said, would you come back to LA and let's talk about this? I said, absolutely. So I told Beyonce that I had to leave rehearsals and fly back to LA. I'll be back shortly. So I sat down with them and they asked me what it was, and I continued to lie to them. In this time, not just over the phone, but to their face. And because now I'm scared.
Right.
Now I'm really in uber fear mode. How am I going to survive this? How am I not going to hurt my kids and all the people that I love and care for, including the people that I represented and also people I worked with? And so I say to them, I'll take a lie detector test to prove that I'm telling you the truth, knowing darn well there's no way I'm going to pass this lie detector test. So now, fast forward a couple weeks after that meeting, and I'm in Santa Barbara celebrating what was my 23-year anniversary with my wife. And I receive a call from one of my partners, and he says, "You remember you told us you'll take a lie detector test?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." He said, "Well, tomorrow we want you to come to Beverly Hills and meet with former FBI's who's now retired, leading polygrapher." I said, "Absolutely." Now, on this phone call, prior to the call and on the call, high as a kite on cocaine.
Right, right.
Um, And so I say to him, I say, absolutely, I'll be there. We hang up the phone. I immediately Google how to beat a lie detector test. And I really felt like Superman, like that I was actually going to beat this lie detector test. So I now though this moment is really that moment where I have to come clean to my wife, because why am I going to leave tomorrow? I need to tell her the truth.
Hmm.
And so this is the first time and only time that I really told her everything I was doing for almost 6 years. Not just the criminal behavior, right, which was the biggest issue here, but I also, was cheating on my wife for a period of time. I was an awful person. I was in a really bad place, and I was not treating my wife with the respect that she deserved. I was dishonest to her. I was
Hmm.
dishonest to everybody during this 6 year period, including being dishonest to myself. And so now I get in the car and the next morning and I tell her I'll be back, enjoy the spa and I'll be back and I'll join you for a nice dinner. Well, on my way down, I decided to take a lot of cocaine with me. This date happened to be May 8th, 2016, because my sober date is this Friday, which is May 9th. But this time of 2016 is when I was my sober birthday, start of my sober birthday. And so I'm snorting lines of cocaine for an hour and a half, the complete drive to Santa Barbara. I'm placing my last bet with my bookie. I walk into the polygrapher's office. I have such an arrogant um, approach where I put my feet up on his desk. I
Right.
put my chair back, and I think I'm going to beat this thing. So the part that I failed to research on the lie detector test that I Googled the day before was that their job as a polygrapher is to make you feel comfortable. And
Right.
by establishing, call it a pseudo relationship or rapport with me. Well, I was so high that I thought that I was beating him and I was the one establishing this rapport with him because we talked for 2 hours. So now I take the test, I get up, I say, "How do I do?" He says, "You'll find out later." I leave, I get in my car, I call my wife, and I say, "I'll be there in about an hour and a half. I will look forward to having a great dinner." I arrive back to the hotel. I try to get access for a moment um, to my office email, and I had no longer did I have any access. So I called my assistant. She said, "I have access." I said, "Okay, now I know I'm in trouble, even
Yeah.
more so
Yeah.
than I've known before." And so I called my attorney, who was Nathan Hochman, who's now the district attorney of Los Angeles. And he said, "Jonathan, you failed that test worse than anybody in this polygrapher's career." And I said, "Okay, what does this mean now?" "It means you need to come see me tomorrow because you're facing 23 years in federal prison." So if that didn't scare me, I don't know what would scare me. And I broke down and cried. Um, I knew also that it was before inevitably this would go public,
Hmm.
and I needed to tell my kids. And that was really hard for me.
I can only imagine, and I know just from other research in you that those relationships are being rehabilitated sort of as we speak. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that and your next steps moving forward. But before I do, I do have just a curiosity kind of thing about the polygraph. As much as you failed, isn't it still inadmissible in court, or do they still use that?
So it is. I don't know if it's legally inadmissible or not, but it had
Mhm.
no impact on my sentencing.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay. But after that, you knew you were in trouble. Everybody else knew that you were in trouble. Things you're coming clean. People are figuring things out. How long of that process through court and everything had to be like a years long process through the sentencing and everything? Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, it was about a year. It was over 14 months.
Okay.
It was almost a year and a half. Um, pre May 3rd, 2017, when I was sentenced, I was on what's called pre sentencing, where I had to report to like a probation officer.
Hmm.
I had to stay within a certain geographical parameters, and I was restricted from outside of those parameters. And I had to call in most every night for drug testing. But these are the consequences of my poor choices.
Did you go to prison for a period of time?
So on May 3rd, 2017, I had my Nathan struck a plea agreement deal earlier than that period of 4 to 6 years. We were seeking a year, year and a half. The government was asking the judge for 5 years, sort of
Mhm.
in the sweet spot of the 4 to 6 year plea agreement. Um, and the judge decided to give me 6 years, given, and I quote, the audacity of my crime. And frankly, in that moment, my heart dropped. But prior to my heart dropping from hearing what the judge ruled in terms of the sentence, which, by the way, I agree with that, and I'm very blessed because she could have deviated from the plea agreement and gone more toward in line with the sentencing guidelines. So I can say that today in recovery, but in that moment, um, on May 3rd, 2017, I also observed that my ex wife and one of my children was sat on the side of the federal government. And that was the most difficult moment for me in that courtroom. And I was very disappointed in one of my sons for being there in that moment.
Mhm.
But years later, now in recovery, I reflect on that. And my wife, my ex wife now, my son who was there, they wouldn't be there sitting on the side of the federal government if I didn't do what I did. So it's me who should be blaming myself because my actions and how that affects other people is not something I can no longer control. And again, I accept that mostly with everybody involved in my behavior. That their behavior I get to accept because I'm the one that triggered or caused or contributed to their choices that they made, right? So I think so May 3rd, 2017, I'm sentenced to 6 years. We asked the judge to give me 2 months before I surrender. And I surrendered on July 11th, 2017 to Sheridan, Oregon federal prison camp because they had what's called a RDAP program, which is a residential drug and alcohol program, which took a year off of my 6 year sentence. And it took about a year and 3 months to get into the program. I was hoping
Mhm.
it would happen rather quickly so I could transfer to California. So after year two there, I was able to request a transfer to Taft, which at the time was the only private federal prison camp in the United States. And it was near Bakersfield. It was Taft is near Bakersfield, which was about an hour and a half from where my kids were living. And I was hoping it was easier for my mom to visit.
Mhm.
And I stayed 9 months there. I was released the day before the camp actually closed due to COVID, I was able to be released. I was one of two inmates released out of all
Wow.
the inmates, and the other inmates, because of the closure, federal government does not want any more private facilities. I felt so bad for those inmates because they were transferred to medium level security prisons for a very long time, and I was blessed that with the help of this organization called the Aleph Institute, they were able to get me and another inmate out. And what I had to do was I had to do 16 months on home confinement with an ankle monitor. And
Mhm.
that was almost worse than prison because I had no freedom of movement. I had to ask permission to go to a grocery store, and I was given 1 or 2 times max a week to go shopping for groceries. I was able to go to a job that I got, and I was able to go to doctor appointments. So I made a lot of doctor appointments because I'm a dual type of contract. And why not go out
Yeah.
and go see what the real world looks like since I've been away from it for so long. Um, and then I followed that up by 3 years of probation, supervised release, and today I'm no longer on supervised release.
So you seem to have a great head on your shoulders, meaning self-awareness, reflection, and it looks like and obviously that work will never end now through the rest of your life. But how long did it take you to start coming to terms? It sounds like you kind of started to come to terms with things relatively quickly.
So I came to terms with that probably about month 7 into prison.
Mhm.
The first 6 months I cried daily. Probably one of the only guys of 450 inmates that was crying excessively. Until someone approached me, an inmate who's still my friend today, and he said, "You got to get over this." I was counting the days. 72 months, right? Every morning I'd wake up. How much longer am I going to be here? I need to get out of here. And then he said, you got to stop crying and you got to stop counting your days. So I started counting Super Bowls. How many Super Bowls do I have left in prison? Because it's once a year I'm counting that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I was able to really reflect because I had a lot of time to myself. I read a lot of books and I was able to reflect. And we had AA meetings inside the prison. Um, so when I came out, um, I thought that I had a lot of humility and I thought I was ready to enter society and prepared for it. I couldn't find a job. I was a felon. And I took a job at Dunkin' Donuts just to put food on in my fridge and on the table. And I got fired after 2 months because I was not cleaning the floors or the countertops well. And I realized at that moment that it was time for me to give back to my brothers and sisters in the 12 step community to not make the same mistakes that I made. And so I went to addiction study school and I got my KDAC. And then I decided to go to graduate school to become a marriage and family therapist with an emphasis in addiction and trauma. And today I'm the happiest I've ever been. I work for an amazing woman named Janelle, who's the CEO and owner of Altus Rehab. It's an incredible 6-bed luxury detox residential where I am a therapist now and a program director. And every day I get to at least try my best to help men and women that have come to our treatment center to maintain a lifetime of sobriety, which has a positive ripple effect on most all areas of someone's life. And most people come here with adverse childhood experiences or trauma that contributes to their dependency on alcohol or substances. And so today I live a life of being a nerd. I'm really proud of myself that I'm a nerd today. I'm proud of myself for whom I'm becoming and who I've become. But this is a program of progress. And with humility, I try most days to do the next right thing. And I try and live according to the principles of the program. And I could look myself in the mirror and say that I forgive myself, that I don't live in my past, but I don't forget my past.
That's wonderful, and I can only imagine that I think there's an internal personal therapy, if you will, to giving back and helping others. I feel like that's the best way forward. And you also have this, I think because of that step of your journey, your story is a bit of a Hollywood story, and I don't just mean that because you worked with big Hollywood clients, but you do have this great character arc, so to speak. And I've heard you mention before books and movies. Can you tell us a little bit about things going on in that world?
Yes, thank you. Um, I will have a book out. My hope is within the next 12 months, followed by perhaps a Netflix series or a movie. We're working on both right now. Uh, but I also want to use, I know I'm not naive. I realize that people don't really care about Jonathan Schwartz. But what's going to interest people in my story is because most people outside the entertainment space are enamored by it. And you add the incredible clients that I was blessed to work with, there are going to be massive people interested in what I have to say in a book and what they're going to see on the screen. And it's not going to just be about like self help. There's going to be real entertainment value. I call it like Wolf of Wall Street on steroids,
Right, right.
because I did a lot of horrible things, and I'm willing to put myself out there because I
Mhm.
know if I could authentically put myself out there, like I'm doing on your podcast, I hope that I could help people that way, no matter how it depicts me. And I know that there are going to be haters out there still, and I accept that because in recovery, I'm no longer a people pleaser. I've learned to set boundaries. I've learned to say no, and I've learned to seek validation from myself internally, not externally from others. So I'm very excited about a book. I also will plan on traveling across the globe and doing speaking engagements. I want to be somewhere between Jordan Belfort on the left and Tony Robbins on the right, and somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
And I want to be the male version of Brene Brown, who I'm a huge fan of Brown. And
Yeah.
I love her key message, which is the courage to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
And that's what I want to talk about too, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to hold yourself accountable and not make excuses and not play the victim role. And to also help people with finances and help people. When I say help people with finances, probably a lot of guests are saying, why would we ever trust you to help you in that? I don't want to be responsible for your finances, but I do want to let people know, for example, particularly people in the entertainment space, the talent, whether it's music, film, TV, or professional sports, please make sure that you ask your business manager for source documents. Circling back to how I got Alanis Morrissette, I was the only one that brought visual aids to the pitch as to why I should be selected as her business manager. Ironically, now I'm hired. Every month that I meet with her, I'm creating spreadsheets. Had she asked me one time for a source document, i.e., a bank statement, I would have been caught right then and there. And I wish she would have in hindsight, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of source documents that are not being provided. And clients, I was fortunate enough that many of my clients were proactive in their affairs, but there were a handful that weren't. And I encourage celebrities and others to be very proactive in their financial affairs and ask for source documents. And that's what I mean by some I'll be helping people understand what to do and what not to do. To avoid people like me, I will help you understand how to avoid people like me.
I mean, in a weird way, it does almost seem easy being in the position you were in to take money, to be like, oh, I'll just use a little of this right here because of the type of access and because people probably don't always ask for those source documents.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly be having power of attorney. It's easy, and that's the other thing. Like you should have you know. There's no excuse for a client not to be able to log in with today's technology, and at very least be a second signatory on any check that goes out over a certain amount of money.
Hmm. Hmm.
And those internal controls were not in place, and they should have been in place.
Right, right. Well, I can't thank you enough for being on the show today, Jonathan. Is there anything else that you want to add before we say goodbye?
I would first want to say thank you, and I also want to ask that if anyone does want to reach out for help in treatment, Altus Rehab is a wonderful place, and we'd be happy to help you. But also, if anyone wants to directly communicate with me, they can find me on my professional Instagram account called The Real Jonathan Schwartz.
Great. And I'll provide some links to those in the show notes for anybody as well. It's a fascinating story. I wish you all the luck. I'll be following you as well.
Thank you, and I really hope, despite it being a little different than your Uber fan base and listeners, I hope they enjoy it. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the show. Before you go, real quick, I have one thing I want to ask. Please go check out our Substack. You can find it through the support tab of our website, astudyofstrange.com. Subscribers to our Substack gain access to episodes early without commercials, also additional content like articles about other strange and mysterious phenomena and topics. As a truly independent podcast, subscribing is the best way to support the show and make sure that we can continue to make A Study of Strange. And until next time, thank you and good night.